you come back home after your holidays in Georgia and want to get to know this country better. Or maybe you just want or need, like inner need with you, to have a piece of Caucasus with you at home after the holidays. So one of the ways that we'll talk about today to how to do it, to have the Caucasian atmosphere at home, is to read Georgian literature. Exactly. And that is why today, in today's episode of the Caucasus podcast, we have prepared for you Georgian books. And the books recommendation that you may read after coming home from your, for example, first holidays in Georgia, or maybe when you are preparing for the next one. Welcome to the Caucasus podcast, where we talk about literature, culture, history, and more. The Caucasus podcast is brought to you by Języki Kaukazu, Languages of the Caucasus. Let's get started with today's episode. Okay, so before we dive into our recommendation, just one reminder that if you want to read this episode, each episode of the Caucasus podcast has a corresponding article on our website, and always the text version and the links for the text version is the description of each and every episode. So you do not have to write every name of the book and every author I will be talking about today. You can just go after listening to that to our website, the link is in the description, and just to check it or to do some notes. Okay, so let's start with today's episode, and I hope our gloomy weather in Poland, in autumn in Poland, will not just discourage you from going with me through the recommendations. It is as this in Poland this time of year during the days, and let's dive into our books. So it was not that easy to just pick several books for you about Georgia and showing you Georgia more, but we have somehow managed to do that, and I'm saying us on purpose because we were choosing the books for today's episode together with Marta from my team Języki Kaukazu, Languages of the Caucasus. So we were choosing as initial step the books, Georgian books separately, and the books we would recommend, and then we have noticed that we have some common ones that we have chosen. So after that, I was more than sure that those books should really make it to our today's episode of the Caucasus podcast. Yeah. So just information how this list was created, and a small disclaimer, we'll talk about each and every book just a little bit, like a highlight for you, because otherwise this episode would be taking hours of your time. And the list of Georgian books, as I mentioned, you will find in the corresponding article. About some of them, I'll be saying that as well later on. We will have in future separate episodes, so we may dive into the authors' books and authors in general, all the books they have written. So let's start with the one of the newest books on our list, and this is Lack of Light, written by Nino Haratischvili. And as we are recording this particular episode, this book has been published in several languages, in Georgian, of course, in German, because the author is writing in German, and in Georgian it was translated. There is also a book translated in Italian, in Polish, in Czech, and I know that the English version is also being prepared, so the translation, the rights have been already bought, so that is why I thought I will tell you already about this book. And for each and every book, we have chosen some covers just for you to have a visuals as well of the books, because I have some of them in different languages in my home library. That is why I will be not showing you this in different languages, but the ones, if it's available mainly in English, or if it's available in German, I thought German, maybe this is the other language that is more common, so that is why you will see also the covers of the books as well. Okay, so we are coming back to Nino Haratischvili. And as I mentioned, the English version of The Like of Light will be soon available. Of course, we will let you know in the podcast. And I believe, by the way, that we will have a separate episode about this author in general. Because as her, for example, other book, very popular, The Eighth Life for Brilka, this is international bestseller. And it will be also transformed in a film. So we will have separate episode about Nino Haratischvili as well. So The Lack of Light, the newest book of Nino Haratischvili, describes Georgia in 80s and in 90s of 20th century. And this was not really easy time and easy period for Georgians, starting with, two civil wars, coup d'etat, and to air up in 90s with notorious lack of electricity and heating and many other problems. So the events of that time really stamped a mark on several generations and of Georgians, and the consequences of those times we see till now in the daily life of Georgia and Georgian politics, economics, in many different areas. So I have read a lot about this period, and I have conducted many interviews about this period because this was part of my scientific work when I was at university working with the Caucasus. And I may tell you for sure that this novel and many novels of Nino Haratischvili really shows the true reality of this Caucasian country of Georgia in those times, so in 80s and in 90s. So if you are interested how the Georgian history looked like, not from the perspective of history books, but from the perspective of single each and every family, I do recommend reading The Lack of Light in any language that you know, I would say. So we have this book, so let's now move several decades into the past. So even before Bolsheviks came to Caucasus, the next book we would like to recommend to you and recommend reading after your holidays in Georgia. This is Ali and Nino, written by Kurban Said. I would say it's almost like must-read book about Caucasus because it is not only about Georgia, it is a little bit about Georgia, Nino, yes, but it's not in general. This is about the Caucasus, and it helps you visualize how the region looked like before Soviet times. And it is also maybe good reading before your trip to Batumi because there is also a sculpture in Batumi called Ali Nino, the huge one. Maybe you have seen it as well when you were in that city. So it is the direct reference to this novel. First was the novel, then it was the sculpture. So this Caucasian book is not only about love. It is about love, but not only. But it shows you the variety of the region. And additionally, while you're reading this book, you may feel the complexity of the region. And from different perspectives, also, unfortunately, because this is the part of the Caucasus life as well, till now, the conflicts in the Caucasus. So this book, although depicting like almost a century ago of the Caucasus, it still shows us something that we can use in the present time of this particular region. The more about the topic of the conflicts as such, we have covered as well in the 9th episode. We will link here to the episode as well, because in the 9th episode of the Caucasus podcast, we have given you 3 recommendations, like 3 war films about Caucasus that we recommend you watching if you know or want to know Caucasus more. Okay, so we have talked about the past. So maybe now let's move more to the present times. And the recommendation we have for you, this is in this category of book, the Georgian modern literature and Georgian writer. So Everybody Dies in This Novel. Yes, this is the title. So soon we'll air a separate episode of the Caucasus podcast just about the book and just about the author, so Beka Adamashvili. And today I just want to say this. This Georgian novel is just hilarious book full of absurd, in a positive way, of course, as well as many references to modern culture and fairy tales. And the main plot, because it is the title that everybody dies in this novel, this is not set in Georgia, so it is not like coming back to this 90s, 80s time in Georgia. No, this is like imaginary place, this is not covering Georgia. But why do we recommend this particular book when we are talking after holidays in Georgia? Because this big book gives you an opportunity to see what young generation, let's call it that way, young generation of Georgian writers think and talk about what they think and talk about. So Bek Adamashvili, this is already, I would say, renowned Georgian writer, renowned Georgian blogger as well, quite a popular, and creative director of one of Georgian advertising agencies. So that is why I say this is like the voice of younger generation. And I believe it is also worth knowing, not only focusing on, this Mariv time and talking about how did Georgia look like, but also see what Georgians think in general, how they write, how they build stories. And there's references to culture, not only Georgian culture, but in general, world culture or pop culture of many films, books, etc. It is something that it is book worth reading for. Okay, so as we are focusing on the Georgian writers, now I would add an additional writer to the list. So I do recommend reading books by Archil Kikodze. So several of his books were already translated, for example, into German, Romanian, Bulgarian, Polish. I have found those translations, but if you have any connections to United States or UK publishing houses, I do recommend suggesting buying rights and translating the books of Archil Kikodze into English, because this is one of the most renowned modern writers. So I was thinking whether to put it on the list for you, as we have podcasts in English, but I thought, first of all, maybe, other languages, not only English. And the second is that he's not only a writer, like you can not only read his books, but you can watch films he wrote, the screen for that place he wrote, and he also was an actor in those films. So there is more to that, in general what is being created by Archil Kikodze. So that is why I thought, first of all, maybe you can read his books in other languages while it will be translated into English. You may already wait and know that this is something good to read. And you may also watch, for example, some films of his. So, as I mentioned, he is quite renowned modern writer in Georgia. And the book, one of the books I wanted to cover, just to give you not just the writer, but just to put the book on your list as well. This is Southern Elephant. And if you like Tbilisi, for example, during your holidays in Georgia, this book will just show you the city, how the Georgians perceive it, like the Georgian living there for generations, how they see it. So as I mentioned, Archil Kikodze is one of the Georgian writers, really receiving several already prizes for his books, also many in Georgia, for example Saba Prize, which we can compare like the English version of the Pulitzer in the United States or Booker in UK. So that is why I do think that this is the writer that you may have on your list, and if you have opportunity to read one of his books. So last but one, it is remaining, remaining. So one was the last recommendation we have for you today. This is from also a different perspective. So for you, if you want to get a grasp of worth reading literature from the 20th century, so from more precise from the Soviet Georgia, and the author we would like to suggest, this is Nodar Dumbadze. So there are several of his books translated into other languages and also adapted as films and as plays. So you may look for yourself. There are several in English, are several in Russian. I know there are in Czech, in Polish. For other languages, I would say for you to recommend to look on your own, because not everything, unfortunately, especially with the older books, is available, like to find it online. And why I say the older books, because maybe one of the best places to look for his books, this is second-hand bookshops, because many of his books were published in 70s and 80s. That is why we are talking about the Soviet period. So not many are once again republished, let's say. So I have chosen for you one of his books. This is called The White Banners, also adopted as a screenplay. That's a fun fact, maybe interesting for you if you are interested in theater. And it describes the reality of prisoners in Georgian Soviet prisons in 70s. So if you are wondering, for example, what is really the deal with so-called Georgian Vori v Zakonie and the romanticization of criminals in Georgia, for example, it would be a novel worth reading. You may find some answers there. So Marta, for you, has chosen, because we have chosen different books but from the same author, she has chosen for you the book I Can See the Sun, which is available, for example, in English and in Russian and of course in Georgian. So I would quote my Marta maybe here. So the book is an artistic way to show us the Georgian countryside, and so it is like as we were almost there. It is a bit romantic, rural way of depicting Georgian countryside life and village. So also something that it is really looked for by Georgians themselves and also by the foreigners. And this Nodar Dumbatz's book displays the daily life of the remote villages in the Republic during Second World War. So I would add to that that it is also adapted as a film. So if you don't have opportunity to read the book, maybe you can consider watching the film. I would not go into discussion what is better, the film or the book, but the film is available, of course, as well. You may just keep in mind that as the book is already 7 decades old, the film as well. So just not to expect, this Hollywood version of the movie. This is more the Soviet version of the movie, but it is good to watch it as well if you are interested in Georgian culture in general and in literature. Okay, so it is almost everything for today. Just one, last but not least, we have prepared for you the recommendations. So this is classic book of Georgian literature. It cannot be anything more classic than that. And this is Night in the Panther's Skin. This is Georgian medieval epic poem written by Shota Rustaveli. So it is seen as by Georgians almost like a national treasure, and I am more than sure you, during your holidays in Georgia, you have been on at least one street or avenue or square that was named after Shota Rustaveli. And I would even say it's like that. Let me know in the comments where I'm shocked by this comparison. It is like Shakespeare of Georgian literature. And I'm not comparing how he writes and Shakespeare writes, but I'm comparing from the perspective of being known by everyone, and everyone is reading that. So this book, because you have heard that, a minute ago, like this is medieval epic poem, and you are probably thinking currently like, Asha, what the heck? Like what you are recommending? It will be really hard to read. And we know that this book may be for, let's say, more advanced fan of Georgian literature, but what it gives us, it enables us to understand the medieval romanticism and the canon of manhood and femininity that you may see as well currently in Georgia. So although this epic poem was written over 700 years ago, the references to the Night in the Panther's Skin you may see almost everywhere in Georgia. That is why we do recommend at least considering it, or at least thinking about it, or at least knowing what it is about, because this is something that you would encounter if you like. It is the moment that if you know that you will notice it immediately and you cannot unsee it. It will be visible everywhere. It was even a TV series that was recorded, I think 3 years ago, something like that, based on the concept of this book. I do recommend that as well. Unfortunately, this is still in Georgia. In Georgian, just there are, I have not found yet the subtitles in other languages, but as soon as it will be available, I will let you know. And the name of that is Tesea. So those were the recommendations for today. And the books we want to recommend you to read after your holidays in Georgia, or if you want to know more about this country. And those are our list of 8 plus books, but I'm curious what would be on your list. What would you add to our list? Maybe let us know in the comments. And also maybe you can write us email, just hit reply if you are a subscriber of our Caucasian Mail, our newsletter. Hit reply to any of our emails and we'll get your views on that. If not, you may also join us on our newsletter, and the link to subscribe to newsletter, it is in the description as well. Yeah, so thank you very much for this lovely journey. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did going through those books. I hope we have covered from different angles, different eras of Georgian literature and situation on the Caucasus, and I hope you will find something for you that will be available, interesting, and available in the language you know, let's say like that. Let us know what you find the most interesting, or what you would add to this list. And as I mentioned, when you want to just go to put everything to your shopping cart and buy all those books, you do not have to rewatch, but if you want, be my guest. But you can also go to our website and you have the written version and in the corresponding article, and the link to direct you to this article you will find in the description of this particular episode of the Caucasus podcast. Thank you very much for today. If you like it, let us know by thumbs up and subscribing and following us wherever you are watching this. And of course, you may share, for example, with one of your friends that is interested in books or in Caucasus, or just reading something else, not only just everything what is available and everyone is talking about, maybe some literature from other regions, for example, from Caucasus. So you may share with one of your friends this episode of the Caucasus podcast. It will help us just reach bigger audience, and this is our goal, just to make those informations and those recommendations available for everyone who wants to have it. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode of the Caucasus podcast, or maybe in our other videos. Bye bye.